Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk with you guys a little bit about this myth that lifting can stunt your growth. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Alright guys, this is one of these pervasive myths that's out there. You usually see it from younger guys, teenage guys who are worried that if they do heavy squats and deadlifts, that it is going to stunt their growth. And we can talk a bit about stuff later in life as far as wearing down disc and all that stuff. That's a separate topic, and we'll cover that here. But what I want to talk about up front is this idea among teenagers, and the theory that they have is that because men are not done growing until the age of 21. So in theory, from 17 or 18 till you're 21, you might gain a little bit more height. Now, how much is going to be dependent on a lot of factors. It's not going to be a lot. It's not like you're going to gain 4 or 5 inches of height during that time. But the idea that they have is that, well, you know, the compressive force of the heavy weights, it's going to maybe slow that growth process down, because people worry about things like epiphyseal plate slipping in kids, and so maybe they kind of take that data over, which is actually fairly rare with good form. They'll take that data over and say, hey, maybe that'll stunt my growth, so I'm not going to do heavy squats and deadlifts. So what this really is just a make-believe excuse to avoid these big lifts for teenagers. That's all it is. It's a cop-out. Because the truth is, what you need to factor in is that what is one of the things that we know that heavy lifting does, right? It causes bone remodeling. In other words, it causes microfractures all through your bones, just like, you know, we talk about microtraumas in muscle tissue. It causes microfractures all through your bones. It causes your body to basically store more minerals in your bones. It puts more magnesium, more calcium, all these things in there to make your bones stronger. It makes your bones stronger and healthier. Now, if you think about it from that perspective, if you have an adaptive stress that causes bones to get denser and get more minerals in them, that is in and of itself a form of bone growth. It's granted, it's growing from the inside out more or less. It's getting harder and more dense, but that is actually going to make more nutrients and things be shuttled to your bones. The whole concept behind this is like, yeah, man, I'm scared to lift heavy weights because I'm scared it'll tear my muscles down and make them shrink. Right? So since when has resistance training ever made muscles shrink? No, it makes them grow. Your body adapts by making them thicker and stronger. So if you think of it from that perspective and you start looking at things like your spine and everything else, we know that people who do big load-bearing exercises have much, much, much healthier bones. Dramatically healthier bones, to the point to where you can tell if someone lifts or not when you do a DEXA scan and you do something that reads their bone density and their spine and legs and everything else. You can tell if they lift based upon the readout. You can actually tell. Their bones measure different. It's one of the best things you can do for bone health. So what I would say to these people is, if you're still growing, in what world do you think that something that will make your bones healthier going to make you shorter? That's literally like worried about your muscles shrinking from lifting. Now, it probably isn't necessarily going to make you taller, but in theory, what could it do? It might help you maximize your potential, because it is putting your body into an anabolic state with your bone tissue. Just like we go through an anabolic state in muscle mass, you're putting your bones into an anabolic state, which means your body is in a position to cause bone remodeling, to shuttle more nutrients into them, more minerals into them to make them stronger. All right? That's a good thing. If you're talking about maybe reaching your total height potential, your genetic potential, it may hypothetically allow you to gain a little more. It might give you a tiny, tiny little advantage. Now, would it probably be enough of a difference to really make a difference? Would you get an inch of height out of it? Probably not. Nothing that extreme. But it might help you if you're doing it through your latter years there of development and growth. It may actually help facilitate a tiny amount of additional growth. So it's actually the very opposite of what these concerns are. But what could someone do who trains and lifts that might actually stunt their growth? How about malnutrition? People say, what? What do you mean? How many of you these teenage guys out there decide to go on a diet and get cut and start losing a bunch of weight? See where I'm going there? You're going to put your body into a catabolic process to where you may not be getting all the nutrition you need. So what happens if you're so focused on losing weight and cutting that you end up creating a nutritional deficiency of some type? Because you're restricting your food intake during a time period when your body wants to grow. You're still going through growth spurts. It needs to grow. What happens if your food intake is restricted? Well, that might have the potential to stunt a little bit of your growth. So if you start looking at things that teenagers can do, and we're talking about height and stunting growth and all of these things, weightlifting isn't going to be a problem. It's the opposite. But cutting weight and putting yourself into an environment to where your body is losing mass. When it's losing mass, now we're at risk of stunting growth. And I'm not saying that's going to stunt your growth, but is it cause for concern? Is it cause for concern? I would say, yeah, maybe that has the potential to cause the problem. Particularly when your body goes to hit a growth spurt and you're in, say, a 500 calorie deficit every day during a growth spurt. Maybe you're not getting adequate vitamin D3. Maybe you're not getting enough calcium, magnesium, all these other things. Maybe you're not getting those things in sufficient quantities in your diet. And your calories are restricted and you hit a growth spurt. That could potentially limit height. That might stunt growth. I'm not saying that it will. I'm saying that it might. So of all the things that a lot of these teens need to be worried about, what they really should be worried about is focusing too much on cutting down and dieting. That's actually a much larger cause for concern than lifting weights. You're only going to get a healthier skeleton and a healthier body and a stronger body that's going to develop better as you finish maturing from resistance training, particularly done correctly with good technique, good progression, safely, all of these things. That's going to help you. It's becoming potentially malnourished or restricting your food intake or your nutrient intake too much is going to be the biggest concern. Like we know that starvation is one of the biggest factors in height. When you start looking at people around the world and average heights throughout history and everything, you can tell how well fed a population was based upon how tall they were. So eating food is one of the keys. No, I'm not telling you to get fat. And what I also don't want people to think is that I'm telling the obese teenagers not to lose weight. But what I do believe is that when teenagers lose weight because of the potential for stunting their growth and development and everything else, that should probably be done under the care of a medical doctor or dietitian. Meaning you really want some professional advice there instead of running out and doing it on your own, because that does have the potential to interfere with your development in certain ways. So that's the real concern. Now let's talk about as we age, because you do see some power lifters and stuff who say that they feel like they've lost several inches of height because they loaded extremely heavy weights on their spine and everything else with their training. But I guess the point that we come to with that is that, how much are they really loading on themselves? And are they loading so much that their spine wouldn't be able to handle it through a normal raw range of motion? Or are we talking about people who were competing equipped, using anabolics, all this other stuff? In other words, when you start adding a large amount of drugs to the mix, you're going to end up subjecting your spine to more compressive stress that might grind down everything more because you're lifting more weights than your muscles and frame would have ever allowed for. Maybe that's a factor. What about if they were equipped? Because a lot of these guys who say this stuff, they were also equipped lifters. Well, if you're an equipped squatter and everything else, you probably are loading your spine with tremendously more weight than you could actually squat. Because there are guys who squat 500 who, when they throw a suit and knee wraps and everything else on, they're squatting 700 or 800. So maybe they're subjecting their spine to a lot more force than they would have had they just done it raw in a normal range of motion. But it really seems pretty unlikely, given what we know about bone density and bone remodeling and bone health and joint health and everything else from heavy structural loading, that lifting pretty heavy would actually cause that. If anything, what do we know looking at bone density charts and all of that? What do we know? We know that heavy resistance training, particularly structural exercises, stuff where you're standing and loading the body, they tend to produce the best bone health, the best bone density, the best joint health, all of these things. So there is something that we should look at that and say, actually, not taken to the extremes, like we're talking about chemically enhanced equipped powerlifting and stuff, when not taken to the extremes, heavy lifting can facilitate better bone health and everything else as we age. You can stave off osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, and if you can stave those things off and slow down bone mineralization, because that's what it does, keeps your bone density high, then that will actually slow the height reduction process that normally occurs in people, right? It will slow that process down. So even if in theory it might reduce disc size or whatever people are talking about in grinding cartilage down, compare that with the retained bone density, you're still going to end up being taller as you get older. You're going to be taller as you get older. So this is ridiculous also. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.